The Sega Genesis versus the Super Nintendo. If you were a kid in the early 90s, you'll definitely remember this vicious battle between the titans. But over 20 years later, which system is superior? James Rolfe gave you his take, and now it's my turn to weigh in on the great 16-bit battle royale. Skip it up and that up! So this first part isn't going to be me showing you commercials. James already did a really good job of that, explaining the whole Genesis does what Nintendo don't concept. What I'm going to do is tell you my story how I acquired both systems, because there's somewhat interesting stories, especially how I got the Sega Genesis. Okay, I lied. I am going to show one Sega commercial because it ties into the story.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo?
Now imagine being 9 and seeing that video and having the only system you enjoyed being the original Nintendo. I did have a Sega Master System too, but I didn't enjoy it that much. Raston was okay, but most of the time I played the original NES and my Sega Master System collected dust. But unlike a lot of kids my age, I wasn't a huge fanboy. I went where good games were. I didn't care what brand was behind them, even when I was young. So seeing all those in-your-face Nintendo commercials from Sega and seeing all of those kick-ass graphics intrigued me. I wanted a Sega Genesis, and I asked for it for Christmas, but I was in for a huge surprise.
Surprise, motherfucker!
See, my dad's friend George was a huge gamer, and he picked up the Sega Genesis day one, but he was also big into computers, and he had an IBM PC and wanted to upgrade its storage. So one day, my dad tells me to take a trip with him over to George's house. Him and his wife lived in a condo only like 15 minutes away from us. And when I walk in the front door, the first thing I see on the living room floor is a brand new Sega Genesis hooked up to the television. Keep in mind, I was 9 years old at the time, had a mullet, and a lisp. This is a reenactment of my reaction.
Oh my god, that's a Sega Genesis! Oh my god, that's so freaking sweet! That's a ninja in Revenge of Shinobi! He looks like a real ninja, that's so cool! Oh my god, that's Altered Beast! It's so radical, their muscles get bigger when they eat those balls! And Rambo 3 is so sweet, you could see
Rambo's epic 16-bit nipples! So after sitting down with the Sega Genesis for about an hour and drooling over games like Revenge of Shinobi and Altered Beast, both George and my dad look at me and ask me, do I like the Sega Genesis? And of course my answer was, hell yeah. My dad then says to me, well, that's good because it's yours and we're taking it home. I didn't even... fuck it.
What the fuck?
Are you kidding me? I don't have to wait till Christmas? I don't have to wait for Santa Claus to drop his fat ass down the chimney and give me a Genesis? I can have this thing right now? So basically what happened was that my dad had a 100 megabyte hard drive, and back in 1990 having a 100 megabyte hard drive is like having a 3 terabyte hard drive now. And because George really needed this hard drive and didn't have the cash to buy it from my dad, he said he would trade the Sega Genesis for the 100 megabyte hard drive. So George gets a hard drive, I get a Sega Genesis, and my dad gets jack shit. Ah, the wonders of being a parent. The summer of 1990 when I got the Sega Genesis was amazing. Truxton kicked ass. Revenge of Shinobi, are you serious? Was amazing. It's still amazing. I could play that game for hours on end to this day. Last Battle, yeah, it pretty much sucked horse erection, but it looked really good and had parallax scrolling. And he would punch really fast and scream like a schoolgirl. That was cool. Then I got Golden Axe for my birthday. That game was amazing. Me and my friend Tom played it over and over and over again. And then Strider came out. Oh my god, that game is so epic. I fell in love with Sega and the Genesis, and like I said before, I was very lukewarm on the brand due to the Sega Master System. What a comeback Sega made with their 16-bit console. I remember thinking, how is Nintendo gonna top this? What can they do to match Sega and the Genesis? Well, I was sure as shit about to find out.
Fast forward to 1991.
It was October. I was in 5th grade, and I had a buddy down in Westchester that was about to celebrate his birthday. Carl's family had money. money. They were loaded, and they got him every game console pretty much on release. NES came out, boom, had it. Sega Master System came out, got it on release. Sega Genesis came out, boom, day one, he had it. He always had every game system before me, and generally I was just excited to try him out. The only time I was ever jealous of him is when he got the Game Boy before I did. I remember being at his house and his mom wanted to drive him to the store to get a Game Boy, and I was so jealous that I actually pouted on the steps leading into his house and wouldn't go in the car with him to go pick up the system. Yeah, when my mom picked me up from his house and found out what I did, she almost kicked my ass royally, but I wanted a Game Boy and I was pissed that he was getting it first. But that's besides the point. We're off topic here. Back to the Super Nintendo. So for his birthday in 1991, guess what he got? A Super Nintendo. We were at his birthday party, everyone was doing their thing. I was sitting there staring at the box of the system. I could not wait to go back to his house, plug that thing in, and play it all goddamn night. It was Nintendo's new system. Are you insane? I was so excited, it was ridiculous. It was 16 bits! It was 16-bit Mario! Everything would have more bits! I had no idea what the fuck bits were, but there were more of them, and I wanted to see the Super Nintendo 16-bit system. I had a boner. Not really, but if I was a little bit older, I probably would have. I mean, God, just sitting there in his room, just playing Super Mario World, all the colors, the gameplay, the new controller, the sound, the way Super Nintendo sounded, it sounded like real instruments. No more beeps and bloops and bops and the tinny sound of the Genesis. This, to me, felt like a next-gen system. I couldn't get enough of it. He had Super Mario World, which was the pack-in game, and he had Pilot Wings, and I literally played it all night. I didn't stop playing it until the sun came up the next morning, because I knew I was not going to see the Super Nintendo again until I got it for Christmas.
And then Christmas came!
Jingle bells. Finally, I had my own Super Nintendo and my ass exploded with delight. I got Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, both amazing games, already talked about them. I got Final Fight. Sure, the SNES version sucked ass compared to other ports of the game. It didn't have Guy either, but it was still fun. I also got Sim City for Christmas for the Super Nintendo. Amazing game, but I was a moron and didn't realize you had to connect the power line from the power plant to your buildings for the cities to actually grow. Remember, I had a mullet.
The graphics!
But there was one last game my mom purchased for me the day before I was going back to school from Christmas break. This game blew away my expectations and became my favorite game not only of the 16-bit era, but of all time. You know what it is? The controls were perfect. The music was incredible. It's still my favorite Castlevania music to this day. And the atmosphere was just fucking creepy. They nailed it. They have not made a game as good as Super Castlevania 4 since. Symphony of the Night came close, but it didn't top Super Castlevania 4. Richard, have you watched Egoraptor's Sequelitis episode on Super Castlevania 4? It's an ungraceful sequel. Here we go. They did not create the levels around Simon's new ability to whip in 8 different directions. There was no innovation. Oh my god, shut up. I don't want to hear about the Egoraptor episode every time I talk about Super Castlevania 4. It was a good game. I like it. I don't agree with his opinion. Oh, okay, folks. Those are my awesome childhood memories of when I first got the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. It was a great time to be a kid and a gamer, and I'll always cherish the good times I had with both systems. In part 2, we'll put the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo toe-to-toe and see who I thought was the true king of the 16-bit generation. You're going to be surprised in what I have to say, so stay tuned.